kindly agreed to be the external examiner for this thesis defense. Hamid, you have 15 minutes to present your thesis, after which we can go to the question answers. We'll begin with Dr. Umair and then we'll open it up for the floor, right? So best of luck. Please begin.
Okay, so Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Muhammad Hamid Saeed Qadri, having roll number MS Device 19010, and I have done this for development of ICT entrepreneurship in Pakistan. So I'll be starting with the introduction that Pakistan, being an important country of South Asia, has been trying different strategies and different variants to improve the quality of life here in Pakistan. So entrepreneurship is one of those strategies that Pakistan has adopted to improve the living standards of people. So globally, we can see that state as an active partner playing an entrepreneurial role can lay the foundation of many new verticals and can explore new horizons. But in case of Pakistan, historically, state's role often remained inactive, and it followed a mixed trend where only at a few points state played an active as well as entrepreneurial role, while at most of the time state remained inactive. Right. So this leads us towards the research question that I'm working on. Is the state's active participation through incubation and acceleration centers more effective than private sector incubators for development of an entrepreneurial ecosystem in Pakistan's ICT sector? This also raises a question that what are some of the limitations of state and private sector interventions and how can these be improved? So we have done our literature review and we came to know that historically we have seen two different schools of thoughts in entrepreneurship. First one is
Hamid, can you guys hear him? Yeah, has it stopped?
No, I think we lost the connection.
So both school of thought still exist till
Actually,
the
it's back.
date and people are really following them, and there is a mix of the followers of both. So this entrepreneurial role is beneficial for innovation, but short-term results. So state's entrepreneurial role is beneficial for innovation, but the short-term results may vary. That was being found by NIAB in 2011. So a healthy interaction and collaboration among institutions, organizations, groups, as well as individuals is vital to form entrepreneurship ecosystem. Entrepreneurs work in an integrated environment and state is one of the biggest stakeholders. So talking about the methodology, this study has a descriptive case study design, making use of structured questionnaires based interviews as concerned departments. So I have with different entrepreneurs from incubators in public and private sector. So the methodology we use and the data we gathered included sources like Ministry of IT&T, organizations like National Incubation Centers, Ignite, National Technology Fund, Pakistan Software Export Board, Pakistan All Software House Association, public and private incubators, educational institutes, ICT firms, and concerned government departments. So we discussed various factors that lead to success of an incubator. For this, we took two public and two private sector incubators and their respective startups for sure. And we have selected Inspire by Natsol Technologies and Takleek by UCP as an example from the private sector, and Plan 9 and X and NIC, National Incubation Center, Lahore, from the public sector. We had at least two success stories from each incubator and one failure story as a focus point. We compared incubators based upon facilities provided, impact created, age of incubator, team size, etc. So talking about the ICT industry and startup ecosystem background, all this really started in 1980 when ICT industry emerged globally and had software industry as its twin. So following trend, states like US has supported ICT and has played an entrepreneurial role by building ICT infrastructure, cutting taxes on ICT, spending on R&D, and similar. Then we compared two different sort of economies that are Asian while European economies are more focused toward development of software to service as its strong local IT hardware sector. ICT investments are made in both Asian and European region and yield positive economic growth in both regions, despite a lot of differences in ICT sector. Then we came to a point that how the Asian economies are working, because our area of focus is Pakistan. So Pakistan being in Asia and being neighbored by China and India, we studied them and we came to know that China has a big IT industry, but the services sector is still growing and seems to have a huge potential to grow. While India showed a great pace to become a champion in IT services export and captured half of global IT services market even in 2008. So ICT industry of both countries is different, despite their seemingly uh, similar characteristics. The common point is that they have supporting industries to develop and grow ICT research and development. So we studied different areas of entrepreneurship. And a list of them is there. The technology entrepreneurship is budding in Pakistan. Social entrepreneurship is there. B2B is growing rapidly. SMEs are emerging, and new areas like kids entrepreneurship and academic entrepreneurship are also having their roots. The incubator startup community's background, there are two different types like business incubators and technology incubators. And the purpose is same, to support, facilitate, and groom new startup businesses in their respective domain. State often tend to open new incubators and facilitate existing ones, and the entrepreneurs who get incubated and then graduated open new companies, and that's how they not only support their people but state as well. So coming towards our area of focus, that is Pakistan. So government of Pakistan in its 11th five-year plan commits to give ICT due importance and formulate and implement ICT policies. State is interested in doing not only because of good governance and sustainability threats, but because of Pakistan's relatively young yet thriving, internationally recognized 2 to 3 billion US dollar IT industry. Punjab Youth Policy in 2012 focused on self-employment and entrepreneurship. So emerging areas of entrepreneurship in Pakistan, Pakistan is focusing on e-commerce portals, online marketplaces, and Internet of Things kind of thing. High-tech startups are also there, but two main emerging fields in Pakistan are fintech and agri-tech. Pakistan being an agri economy and being a very populous country is really thriving in these two domains. So we do have different public and private sector incubators to facilitate these things, and public sector incubators include Plan 9, Plan X, and NICs. All the academic institutes do have business incubation centers and ORIX with them. And initiatives like DigiSkill, ZeroStar, and MITF are also facilitating. While in private sector, we do have Inspire, Nest.io, Kite, TeamUp, The Elite, Lum Center of Entrepreneurship, IBA Center of Entrepreneurship Development, NUST Technology Incubator, and ID92. So, as per the interviews we have conducted with 200 plus entrepreneurs, we focused on four areas: that how satisfaction level is about the stipend and in-kind support provided by both private and public sector. And we came to know that public sector incubators are really this thing, and they are providing sufficient stipend to their startups, and startup really need them. After that, we compared training sessions and mentoring provided in both cases, and the result is pretty much similar with a slight result in favor of public sector incubators. Then we compared the management team of incubator, and once again, public sector incubators are having a more performance as well. Last but definitely not the least, we compared the selection criteria of those incubators, and we came to know that startups are more satisfied about the government sector incubators, as their selection criteria is very transparent and very easily available to the startups. So the overall result is pretty much sum of all these four results that shows us that government sector incubators are doing really great and do have potential to further improve, while private sector incubators need to learn from the performance and strategies of government sector incubators. This leads us towards the result that startups who got graduate from private incubators often tend to apply again for government incubators for their in-kind support and mentoring training sessions, etc. And government incubators are bigger in size, scale, and are mature in age, having developed a good alumni network that is helping them and that is helping the startup ecosystem in Pakistan as well. So with coming towards the conclusion and recommendations, we know that there are 74 major incubators working in Pakistan, both in public and private sector. And government incubators need to focus more on quality with increasing quantity, that is increasing day by day with the recent expansion plan of Plan 9 under the title of Regional Expansion Plan. Prisma of leadership and their active role is crucial. Leadership must be hired based upon their related entrepreneurial experience and not just management experience. And government incubators should be linked with state-owned media. And last but definitely not the least, the crux of all my thesis and the presentation, government incubators should not limit their experience, facilities, and resources to themselves only, but should play an active role to foster the culture of entrepreneurship and help private incubators and academic incubators through public-private partnerships. That's all from my side, and I would like to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hamid. Let's just, and also thank you for keeping to the time. Let's just move on to question and answers. I think we'll begin with your external examiner.
Thank you so much, Ali, and thank you, Hamid, for your presentation and for writing a very comprehensive thesis. I quite enjoyed reading it. I have a few questions, but I want to start with a methodology-related question, which you have briefly mentioned in your presentation as well, but I want a little more clarity. You started by saying that you had selected two incubators from the public sector and two incubators from the private sector. And at a subsequent point in time, you mentioned that you had carried out interviews with entrepreneurs that were based at these incubators. Can you please specify an exact number of interviews that you carried out? And sort of, if you could give us some profile of the type of entrepreneurs just off the top of your head that you want. Some summary statistics would have been helpful, but obviously, you can also just narrate them.
Right. So as I mentioned during my presentation, that I interviewed 200 plus entrepreneurs from these incubators, and there are others who are not from these incubators, but those are not part of this study. So I interviewed entrepreneurs from NIC Lahore, that is based in LUMS at the moment, and Plan 9 and Plan X. Not only their current cohort, but their alumni as well. So the promising name from Plan 9 include BookMe, Euphoria, XR, and printable.pk. So these are promising startups who are doing really great as a success story. And as a failure story, I interviewed Travelay that was sort of a success, but then they collapsed. So I interviewed them, I talked to their co-founders, and then I came to know about these things. So they also told me the phenomena that startups firstly join some public sector incubator, and then sometime they move to private sector incubators. And most of the time when they join some private sector incubator, they lead in some public incubator in later stages. And Plan 9 and Plan X, they are glued in a way that startups who graduated from Plan 9, they are more likely to be part of our next cohort of Plan X, because Plan X is for some sort of mature startups. Okay. So yeah, these are some prominent names I can share you.
Thank you very much. So my next question is substantive. It relates to some of the analysis that you presented. And I am particularly interested to hear your perspective on what you think that the state-owned or state-run incubators are doing that is distinct and that gives them an advantage over private sector incubators. I've heard that obviously you've reported the satisfaction rate figures from the respondents themselves, but so from like overview perspective or an overarching perspective, where do you see that sort of advantage being present in public sector incubators in particular?
Right. So out of these four, the first phenomenon, the variable that is stipend and in-kind support is really helping public sector incubators getting the satisfaction level with startups. So startups in their early phase, they really need some sort of financial support, either that can be provided in form of stipend or in form of seed investment. And the seed investment ecosystem is not really built over here. The investor networks are not really there the way they should be there. So stipend is really effective in this way because mostly startups are coming from a background where they were doing a job 9 to 5, and when we give an equivalent stipend to that person who is coming from a 9 to 5 background, so it's really helpful for him to perform this transition from being an employee to being an employer. So yeah, that's the main factor. And the other thing is that they are really bigger in size and they do have a good alumni network. And most of the problems get solved within the alumni network. While on the other hand, the private sector incubators like Inspire and Takleek, they are really striving to gather their alumni. The alumni is not really there. I have closely worked with Inspire other than this thesis, and I really know that they only know the current cohort, and the last 7 cohorts are just gone. They have no connection with them. While in
Right.
case of Plan 9, Plan X, and NICs, the alumni network is really strong, and they tend to help the current cohort as well.
Okay, and the second question on your analysis that I have is from the perspective. So, ek to you've mentioned the perception of the respondents that you interviewed and their views on this. But if we were to sort of take this analysis to a slightly more deeper level, what do you think are some of the reasons why private incubators, if you were to sort of focus on the kind of incentives that they have, or the larger sort of maybe political economy factors that condition private sector incubators, that have inhibited them from playing a more substantive or a more productive role in the startup ecosystem in Pakistan? So what do you think are some of those factors that are responsible here?
Right. So private sector is most of the time doing it for the PR purpose. Like NetSol really started it for PR and their publicity thing, and they're not really inclined in fostering the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Pakistan. They seem to have nothing to do with this idea of fostering entrepreneurship. They're doing it just for their own sake and just for their own publicity. And if they have 10 startups per cohort, they are fine with it. And they are just doing it as a regular practice that 10 startups are coming and going. While in case of public sector incubators, there is a M&E mechanism. They really care about that how much jobs are being created. That's the main thing. That in government sector incubators, the number of jobs being created is very important thing. And secondly, how much revenue startups are generating and how many international titles they are being awarded. Because in government, the focus is to build a positive image of Pakistan and to uplift.
Hamid, I think we lost your connection at the positive image. So can you please come back? Hamid, can you hear me? Can you reconnect? No, would it be possible, Amna or anyone, to just let Hamid know that his connection has dropped, so that he could reconnect?
I think he just got back.
Okay, great. Hamid, could you please continue?
I can hear
Hamid,
you,
you
sir.
can stop sharing your slides. Maybe that will help.
I can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
हाँ, अब हम आ रही है आपकी आवाज, वो बीच में थोड़ी देर के लिए कट गई थी.
Okay, may I know the last thing you
You
guys
said
heard, so I can
because
continue from there.
you said public sector incubators are motivated by motivated by by the fact that they have to promote a positive image of Pakistan. So that acts as a strong incentive for their performance. If you want to add to that point.
Yes, and on country, the public sector incubators are not really focused on publicity. They are doing it to uplift the economy. and to build a positive image of Pakistan, that how many jobs are being created, how many females are being empowered, how many international titles have the startups won, how many foreign investment is coming to Pakistan. So their agenda is different, and they are really working on that agenda, while the private sector has different agenda.
Right. I think that's a very good point about sort of different incentives that the two face. I feel like that point, could be sort of made more forcefully in the thesis. But I think you've clearly have thought about this and are very clear about it. So I think that's an important aspect. Ali, I have a couple of other questions, but I think if others want to sort of jump in at this point, it'd be good to order. I need to order my thoughts on some of these issues as well. So if you have any questions.
Sure. Actually, I want to first apologize. I was a bit haphazard when I came in, and I forgot to properly introduce Dr. Umair. Dr. Umair is assistant professor at LUMS and is a sociologist, a PhD in sociology from the LSE, and he's in the politics department at LUMS, and is a fantastic scholar.
Minor correction: I was in the politics department. I'm now in sociology, so I've
now in
made my way home, basically.
Good. So, and is a fantastic scholar who works on issues of political economy, development, and markets in Pakistan. So, thank you so much for your initial thoughts. We'll get back to them if there are any other questions. I can just start off actually before that, and then the others can chime in, or perhaps Umair can go. We can go back to Umair. Just a brief thing, Hamid, you had a very interesting angle in your thesis on the comparison between China and India, of how the IT sector in China is more inward. It is primarily kind of looking at or kind of addressing or catering to the local economy because of the language issue. Overwhelmingly it's in Mandarin, and most of it is actually spoken in China, right? And versus India, which is more globally oriented. So and this is something that I think you should probably even include, if you can tell us briefly, where do you think a Pakistan sector comes in? Is it closer to China or India in its overall inward or outward orientation? Hamid, can you hear?
I think Hamid's lost his connection again.
I think we'll have to wait. I think he said he is in the ITU building, but and he's doing a job somewhere there. I've forgotten where. But does anybody get in touch with him? I don't. Let me just get.
I don't have his contact information.
Let me. Hamid, can you hear us?
Yes, sir, I can.
Did you hear my question?
No, sir, I just lost a connection in between. You were introducing Dr. Umair, and then I just lost the connection.
Okay. So my question was very short. It was more like asking you to clarify. You made an interesting comparison in your thesis between China and India. China being inward looking in its software industry because of the language issue, because of its more inward looking economy as far as the service sector is concerned, not industry. Versus India, which is more outward and also is more linguistically also kind of more international. So where would Pakistan's IT industry, not in terms of scale, which is obviously much smaller, but in terms of this basic orientation, where would it lie for you?
Right. So this is really something of my interest, and I came to a conclusion that Pakistan's ICT industry is more similar to India's ICT industry, and that is more focused on providing services to different countries through the various channels like software houses and freelancing channels. And government of Pakistan is also supporting the same by introducing different freelancing training workshops and a platform like DigiSkills that is to there to empower 3 million freelancers. And I have been an active part of that program, and that is really helping new people learn freelancing and learn freelancing skills that the thing they are selling on those platforms. So Pakistan's ICT industry is very much similar to India, and it is growing by leaps and bounds. And we are expecting to somewhere compete with India. Not being a direct competitor, but yeah, in terms of freelancing, the volume is huge and it's getting
Right?
increased.
Great. Just another quick point. I think it would be better, as you said in the beginning, rather than saying that the state has had no role in entrepreneurship in general. I believe your focus is on the ICT sector, right? Rather
Right.
than because there's a huge literature which Dr. Omer, Dr. Fahad, and others in this probably know about the state's role in, let's say, industry and even agriculture. But so let's probably, I think what it would be better if you articulate it in terms of the state's role in historically. The state was late, and I think you mentioned it in your thesis. The state
Yes.
was late in getting on the IT bandwagon. So I think it's better if you frame it in a way so that there's no confusion. That it's not in entrepreneurship in general, but more in terms of like
Sure, sir.
ICT.
Sure, sir. And I guess that's a little chunk of that is there when I mentioned that software industry and ICT industry and entrepreneurship, they all started becoming a trend in parallel. Because in Pakistan, when entrepreneurship started in late 2000, so it was primarily technopreneurship. So only technology entrepreneurs were considered entrepreneur. But later we added different other dimensions like fintech, agri-tech, and even outpreneurship. Terms like kidpreneurship came into being. So my thesis really focused on the ICT sector because that's my own background, and I guess one should focus on areas that he or she is really comfortable about and have a grip on. So inshallah, I'll be focusing on making it more concise and more relevant to ICT sector.
Okay, great. Is it Dr. Mesh? Should we come to you first? Yeah, should we take a round and then come to you?
Fahad has a hand raised. I think we can take Fahad's question and then I'll ask a couple of follow-ups.
Okay, great. Okay, Dr. Fahad, over to you. You're
Fahad,
mute.
mute too.
Happens every time. Happens every time I do this. Thank you, Umair, for joining us today. So, and congratulations, Hamid, for doing a wonderful job. I just have one main question. आपने ये जब आप when you were looking at private sector and public sector incubators, were you able to develop a sense of the type of investments that the two are attracting and the type of maybe you have already talked about it and I've missed this. लेकिन किस have you been able to develop a sense of the type of capital that they're attracting? And what is the source of that capital? Is that capital coming from outside? Is that the capital that is being generated from within the country? तो ये startup जो हैं वो किस किस्म की हैं? I mean, one thing that I, for example, feel कि पाकिस्तान का startup जो scene है, it has actually picked up a lot of speed in the past few years, and I think one reason might be that it is without the government deregulating a lot of business sectors in the country, this gives an opportunity for foreign capital to move into the country. I mean, for example, good transportation is one area जहाँ पे अभी तक foreign capital जो है वो investment नहीं आई थी, लेकिन just recently, I think a couple of days ago, UAE-based company has actually purchased a trucking company in Pakistan, right? So एक startup थी. So that's a completely new development. We are actually seeing foreign investment now, or movement of foreign capital into areas that have so far not been open to foreign investment or have not attracted a lot of investment. So कोई आपकी सेंस वो डेवलप हो सकी कि किस किस्म की कंपनीज को प्रमोट हो रही हैं, किस किस्म की कंपनीज जो हैं वो फॉरेन कैपिटल अट्रैक्ट कर रही हैं कि नहीं कर रही, एंड देन जो लोकल इन्वेस्टर्स हैं, आई मीन फॉर एग्जांपल जहाँ JS जो जहांगीर सिद्दीकी ग्रुप है, उनका जो वेंचर कैपिटल्स का आर्म है, दे आर द लार्जेस्ट इन्वेस्टर्स इनटू the startup scene in Pakistan. They have invested something like $100 million worth of money into various startups in Pakistan. So, how are they actually generating those funds? Are they sort of managing it for people outside? आपको कुछ इस तरह का कुछ sense कोई develop हुई कुछ? I think it would be interesting to know about it and talk about it. उसकी अपनी जो एक political economy है.
Right. So that wasn't the main area of my research, but the things I came to know during my research, I would like to share them. That Inspire, being a CSR project of NetSol Technologies, is just getting that money from NetSol Technologies from their office in US, in China, and in Pakistan. So they term it just as a CSR project of them, and they are not really looking for new investors, and they are not really looking for foreign investments to come into their incubators and into their startups. So they are doing it like that. As on the other hand, Takleek, being an academic incubator, is attracting foreign investment, and they are mostly in research and development sector. The students are converted in entrepreneurs, and they are working with the researchers and professors there at the UCP, and that's how they are working. While on the other hand, Plan 9, Plan X, and NICs, they are working on a case-to-case basis. Every startup, every entrepreneur is unique, and they are having almost every strategy to increase the revenues, to increase the jobs created, to increase the empowerment being generated. And they are really inclined towards getting foreign investment, and they are targeting towards investment like on stages where they can go to Series A, Series B, like where they can raise $1 million or more than that. And they are not really looking for investments below that. They are not really looking for seed money or seed investments. And they are waiting to get their product mature, and then they tend to go to market. So that's the thing I came to know during my research, but definitely that wasn't the main area of focus of my research. I focused on startups who are in B2B, a business to business sector, and they are mostly marketplaces, like marketplace for event, marketplace for printing, marketplace for clothes, marketplace for the stationery and things like that. So startups like those were my area of focus, and they are attracting huge investments these days. A startup named Bazaar recently secured a huge investment, and they were also one of the participants of my surveys. And yeah, that's how I did it.
I have a question, Ali. Can I go ahead?
G, please go ahead.
Hamid, so you mentioned incentives for private sector, and your sort of take was that they're doing this largely, as a way of self-promotion and for PR purposes. And you mentioned that this government has its own set of reasons for doing this. I want to sort of push on that a little more, and sort of really see if we can unpack these reasons for why public sector is providing better services, or why there's greater focus on making sort of more productive incubators on the public sector side. So have you been able to identify through your research, through your interviews, reform champions, for example, or departments or organizations within the government that are that seem to be sort of doing better in promoting incubator work, and what are sort of some of the incentives that they're facing to do this? I mean, एक तो हमें पता है कि जी ठीक है, पाकिस्तान का पॉजिटिव इमेज प्रमोट करना चाह रहे हैं, वो ये चाहते हैं कि वो करें, या एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेशन वो चाहते हैं, लेकिन इसकी अपनी एक यानी कि इसकी अपनी लॉजिक क्या है, ये किस बुनियाद पे हो रहा है, इसमें अकाउंटेबिलिटी वगैरह जो है वो कैसे हो रही है? आपने एमएनई की बात की, तो उसके ऊपर थोड़ा सा बताएं कि गवर्नमेंट जो है वो हमें क्यों नजर आता है गवर्नमेंट एकदम से, क्योंकि गवर्नमेंट और 10 करोड़ सेक्टर्स हैं जहां पे गवर्नमेंट जो है वो कुछ भी नहीं करती, या वहां पे आपको सर्विस डिलीवरी फेलियर मिलता है डिस्पाइट द फैक्ट कि वहां पे भी बहुत ज्यादा गेन्स जो हैं वो किए जा सकते हैं. सो व्हाई इज इट इन दिस पर्टिकुलर सेक्टर we see the government deviating from what we would classify sort of as more traditional failures that we've seen in other areas of intervention?
Right, sir. So historically, the focus was on industrial policies and establishing huge industries and making the rich richer. But from 1990 onwards, the trend shifted a little bit, and middle class got started being empowered. We have seen different set of things that really indicate that middle class is being empowered, and government is sort of inclined towards the things where they don't need to micromanage things, and they give a small amount of money maybe, or small amount of services or support to people, and they do earn their livelihood themselves. And entrepreneurship is one of those things that can really do this wonder, and that's how government is really inclined towards this thing. And another claim that is not really part of this study, but that is something I'm currently working on as a research paper, so I would like to share that as well. That government of Pakistan tend to follow certain countries, and they do whatever they do. So in our course by Dr. Iza Aftab, she told us that don't do what US wants you to do. Do what US do. So that's how Pakistani government is working. They are blindly following few countries and their policies and just implementing and replicating those policies here in Pakistan. And sometimes they tend to work good and sometimes they don't. So currently, as we are seeing that entrepreneurial ecosystem is getting hype all across the world. So government of Pakistan, being a follower, is just doing the same. Even just few days ago, Prime Minister of Pakistan even tweeted about a private sector business getting investment, and that was newly a new thing. Never ever in history such thing happened that Prime Minister of Pakistan is tweeting about a private sector business, and a business that is just starting at a starting point. So yeah, I think that this is because of the historical trend of following the trend.
Hamid, sorry to cut you off. Just, I mean, I understand your work is primarily about what people in this sector feel about, in the two, like government incubators versus private incubators. So I understand that, you didn't really focus on why it has happened the way it has happened, right? Rather than what is
Yes.
going on, right? But just if you were to think about it, would you think what Dr. Umair said? I think it's a very important point. If you were to just like think aloud, does it have to do, this push? Did it come from certain people in the government, in higher powered offices? It came from certain individuals. I mean, you could have an opinion on that. It need not be entirely kind of, but if you were to be asked that, okay, why is it, given that there are so many failures on the government side, the government usually doesn't do as well in many cases, why is it doing slightly better in this particular? So what would you say to that?
Right, sir. So it has to do something with the third variable we were focused, that management of incubator. So yeah, the management of incubator and the leadership of incubator is really coupled with the growth of that incubator. And in government sector, we took example of Plan 9, Plan X, and definitely 4 years ago or 5 years ago, Dr. Umar Saif here at PITB Punjab IT Board initiated those things, and he was a man in power, and he was closely working with people in power as CM or as PM of this country. So individual has a very good connection in forming the policies and forming a new incubator and how it will work in future as well, because those individuals are no more here, but the policy is there and incubator is still doing working in the same manner. And the NIC is there. NIC was primarily led by Mr. Faisal Sherjan, and his enthusiastic, energetic leadership is still there, helping the incubator. So yeah, I really think that leadership and the people in power has something to do with this change of thinking process.
Dr. Mann, would you?
No, Ali, I think I think I mean, I'll have some parting thoughts on this, but I think I want to sort of again congratulate Hamid on an insightful study. I also think that there are lots of things जो हामिद ने एनालाइज की हैं जो मेरे ख्याल से टेक्स्ट के अंदर शायद थोड़ी रिफ्लेक्ट हो सकती हैं बेहतर. क्लियरली आपको पता है, आपने सोचा है इन चीज़ों के बारे में. अली के क्वेश्चन से भी मुझे यही इंडिकेशन मिली है, फहाद ने भी जो आपको कहा. सो देयर इज क्लियरली अ लॉट ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन दैट यू हैव. एंड ऑब्वियसली आई नो दैट जब आप थीसिस लिख रहे होते हैं तो उसमें कंस्ट्रेंट्स होती हैं, यू कांट पुट एवरीथिंग इन हियर. maybe just an offhand comment on my part would be कि आपने कुछ बैकग्राउंड इन्फॉर्मेशन थोड़ी ज्यादा है, कुछ एनालिटिकल काम जो है वो आप उसमें और भी ऐड कर सकते हैं, उसमें गुंजाइश है. या सब्सिक्वेंटली अगर आप इसको एक रिसर्च पेपर या किसी और फॉर्म में पब्लिश करना चाहें तो आई एम श्योर देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ अदर इंटरेस्टिंग थिंग्स दैट यू कैन मेंशन here as well. But I think Ali, that's pretty much it from my end. I think these were some of the questions that I had after reading the thesis and the presentation, looking at the presentation, and I think they've been answered well.
Great. I'll just go through one final round. If anybody has any questions, if not, then we can kind of ask Hamid to.
If we have time, I'm a bit curious about a couple of things. Okay,
sure,
so I have maybe two small questions. One has to do with even the thing that we were discussing just a moment ago, because I do remember, if I'm not wrong, I do remember seeing some kind of a factor titled लीडरशिप एंड करिश्मा, जिसके ऊपर आपने कुछ एनालिसिस किया है, जिसके ऊपर मतलब मे बी आपके इंटरव्यूज के थ्रू सम काइंड ऑफ कंक्लूजन्स दैट यू हैव गॉटन, उसके बारे में थोड़ी सी बात करना. दूसरा, लिट रिव्यू में आपने बड़े क्लियरली मेंशन किया था समथिंग दैट वाज क्वाइट interesting to me, and I think it's probably very, very important in general when it comes to this kind of a topic, that has to do with the ecosystem, right? An integrated ecosystem. अब वो आपने रिव्यू में तो मेंशन किया है, but I also would want to hear your thoughts on how that ties in with what you found, right? आपके analysis के through. And I guess if I was to put that question a bit more clearly, it would be maybe something like this: how far are we from an ideal situation, when we want to think about such kind of an integrated ecosystem? And two, in your head, what would that ecosystem look like? उसमें क्या factors होंगे, क्या aspects होंगे, क्या चीजें होंगी, ठीक है? So thank you for that.
Right. So I would first like to answer the charisma thing, and as I just mentioned, that incubator management thing is closely coupled with that charisma thing. That what is the top leadership of that particular incubator? Startup tend to join an incubator just because of the charisma of the leader of that incubator. Like in case of Inspire, Mr. Ayub Gauri is the head of Inspire, and most of the startup are just joining Inspire just because Ayub Gauri is head of that incubator. They don't really know what is the manifesto of that incubator, what services they are offering, what support they are offering, what is the cohort size. They look at these variables, but on later stages. The first thing they look at is who is the manager or leader of that incubator, right? So this is a phenomena in selection of an incubator. But the other thing, that is the selection process of that incubator, is very much heavier than the thing I just mentioned earlier. Good. So that is more powerful in terms of making a decision that whether an entrepreneur is going to that incubator or not. Because if selection criteria is not transparent, is not good, is not giving chance to people other than tech entrepreneurship, so startups do not tend to join that incubator. So this was about the charisma thing. And about the ecosystem thing, that is something I was really enjoying while working on this thesis, because the conclusion is that the government sector is doing really good because they are more integrated. They have the same agenda all over, because if there is an incubator in Punjab or in Karachi, like Sindh, or in other provinces, so the agenda is same, because government is same, because leader is same, because stakeholders are same. While in case of private sector incubators, this is not the case. Takleef do have some other agenda, Inspire do have some other agenda, incubators like policies, they do have consistent policies, and they do have bigger alumni networks. So, if I'm allowed to use a proverb in Urdu, so may I? So there is a
Of course,
proverb
क्या
that says,
हमारी जुबान है क्यों नहीं बिल्कुल.
okay, so there is a proverb that says "Dead int ki masjid." So in case of private sector incubators, they are building small dead int ki masjids. But in case of government sector, there is a huge Jamia masjid, and that is doing really great. So that's the main thing I was working on, and I was trying to prove that government sector is more integrated. And now it is time, answering the question of Dr. Abu Bakr, now it is time to integrate the government sector with private sector as well, because private sector is also doing good in their humble capacity. And if we integrate all these under one umbrella, under one policy, under one framework, so that would be a great thing, and that would be something to help entrepreneurs and help new people join the entrepreneurial ecosystem, because there are so many people who want to be an entrepreneur, but they don't have the enough courage to dive in the pool. So if integration would be there, state media would be there to support, and different state departments like NADRA would be there to provide the data. State Bank would be there to do the fiscal policies and payment gateways for startups here in Pakistan. And then the private sector will also join hand. So this will create a huge ecosystem, an integrated ecosystem. And Pakistan, being a populous country and being having a huge human potential, can really win this battle through the entrepreneurship.
हाँ चलें good. I'm happy that you've mentioned legal and infrastructural kind of factors, because उससे ही फिर वो integrated ecosystem एक proper तरीके से हो सके. ठीक है, good, thank you.
I think one very important takeaway, which you should also perhaps, as Dr. Abu Bakr has said, is perhaps focus a bit on saying that there's this idea of entrepreneurship as just being led by great people, the great individual, right? Whereas actually entrepreneurship is more a process generated through these kinds of integrated ecosystems, right? I think that would be something that would be an interesting way to kind of counter our conventional idea of entrepreneurship as just being like something, because in the conventional idea it's something that only certain people born to do certain great things can do, whereas in the other idea it's something that actually others can do, most people can do if given those sets of opportunities, right? So I think that would be a good way to kind of put it. Any other questions before we ask? No. Okay. So thank you so much, Hamid, for a very good presentation. I would now request you to step outside of the room.
Sure, sir.
And, we will be in touch with you, obviously, very soon. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you so